If you are watching this video, you need advice because you're deep into your fantasy football playoffs. Either that, or you just need some practice. Time for FF Champs on Football Nation. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. He's Billy Enright of FFChamps.com. Billy, it's fantasy football playoff time. Time for the pretenders to step aside, the contenders to find out what's going on. What is going on? Who we starting? Who we sitting this week?
Well, you know, in the semifinals for fantasy football, you want to roll with the guys that got you here. You know you're going to start your studs. Even if they have a bad matchup, like Aaron Rodgers, for example, playing against a tough Chicago Bears defense, he has a bad matchup, or Tom Brady against the 49ers, you're still sticking with those guys. But what I want to help people out today is kind of go over the people that you might be on the fence about. We'll start it off with the quarterbacks. Josh Freeman of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's one of those on-the-fence type quarterbacks. You don't know what you can really expect from him, high level of production every week. But you know what? He has a great matchup this week against the 32nd pass defense in the league. The New Orleans Saints are absolutely terrible when it comes to stopping quarterbacks. And remember the first time the Bucs and the Saints played this year, Josh Freeman had his best game of his career. 420 yards and 3 touchdowns. That was his highest scoring fantasy production-wise all season long. And I also like Cam Newton this week of the Carolina Panthers. You know, he was burning a lot of people during the regular season, but he's been on fire the last 3 weeks. 10 touchdowns in 3 games. He had 116 rushing yards last week, and he's playing a banged-up Chargers defense that is giving up the 7th most points to quarterbacks.
2 words you mentioned to start this off, studs and fence. And when I look at your quarterbacks to sit, Jay Cutler and Matt Schaub, I don't know if they're studs or not, but fence is the perfect word to describe those 2 guys.
Yeah, they're definitely fence-type quarterbacks, and this week they're bench-type quarterbacks. Don't put these guys in your lineups. Do yourself a favor. Jay Cutler, I have him ranked 23rd this week. We all remember that 4-interception game the first time the Bears and Packers played this year. And you know what? He's dealing with a neck injury, so he's going to be less than 100%. I'm leaving Jay Cutler on the bench this week. Same goes for Matt Schaub. I have him ranked 18th this week, and ever since he threw that 5-interception game against the Jaguars, he only has 3 TDs in his last 3 games. Just not enough bang for your buck this week, especially for the fantasy football semifinals.
At this point in the playoffs, when it comes to running backs, you want a consistent guy, but you're also looking for that one guy who might take some of that juice from Adrian Peterson, have one of those guys. Your 2 advices to start, they have that potential, don't they?
Yeah, and we'll start it off with C.J. Spiller, and I don't care that he's playing the Seahawks' 4th-ranked rushing defense, because without Fred Jackson in the lineup, Fred Jackson went to IR this week, it's going to be Spiller all the time. He's a very explosive running back. We know that. And he's one of those running backs that can get all of his fantasy production with just 1 play. He's very capable of busting out an 80-yard run for a touchdown. So even if he starts to struggle a little bit against the Seahawks, he's really one of those guys that he's so explosive, he can score at any time, and that's why you have to have someone like that in your lineup. And then how about Jarvis Green-Ellis? I have him ranked 16th this week at FFChamps.com. 100 yards in 3 of his last 4 games, playing against a Philadelphia Eagles defense that has given up a touchdown and at least 100 yards to running backs in each of their last 2 games.
Now, your 2 running backs you're advising to sit fantasy football playoff time at this time couldn't be 2 polar opposites. One is a guy who's drafted high on draft day and has been for many years. Another is one of those guys who's emerged at the end, but you're saying be cautious with this waiver wire pickup type guy.
Yes, and that guy that emerged recently is Montel Owens of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have him ranked 31st this week. I'm just not trusting this guy. Keep in mind, Butch, he was their 4th-string running back, 4th on their depth chart, after Maurice Jones-Drew went down with an injury, after Rashad Jennings, after Jalen Parmalee went down with injuries, then Montel Owens finally came to the surface. And keep in mind, you know, he had 91 yards and a touchdown last week, but that was against the Jets. Anyone is having a lot of success. Any running back is having a lot of success against the Jets this year. And this weekend, the Jags play the Miami Dolphins, and they have given up the 7th least points to running backs. So definitely not a favorable matchup. I would leave Montel Owens on the bench. And then also the household name you were referring to is Michael Turner of the Atlanta Falcons. I have him ranked 26th this week. He's on a 4-game touchdown streak, which is nice. But I think that ends here in Week 15. Playing against the New York Giants that have allowed just 1 rushing TD, over the last 4 games.
Yeah, a little cross plug here for FF Champs to your compadre, Kerry Byrne at Cold Hard Football Facts. The Falcons, both fantasy-wise and real-wise, are really starting to show some weaknesses by the numbers, aren't they?
They really are, and I think most of it has to do with their competition, their schedule this year. They haven't played many quality teams at all.
Let's go to wide receivers to start. I'm at my fantasy football players. I need a guy who might win for me, like Victor Cruz did for me last week.
Right. I love Steve Smith of the Carolina Panthers. You know, I'm really excited about his quarterback, Cam Newton, playing well. And that bodes well for Steve Smith, of course. Back-to-back games with 100 yards and at least 5 receptions, playing against a banged-up San Diego Chargers secondary that just got burned by the Steelers. Steve Smith is someone you can definitely rely on for double-digit fantasy points here in Week 15. And then someone else I like this week is Josh Gordon of the Cleveland Browns. I realize he started out a bit inconsistent. Three catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. But all of a sudden, he has 14 grabs over the last 2 weeks, back-to-back games with over 85 yards, and he's playing against the Washington Redskins defense that has given up the second most points to wide receivers this year.
What wide receivers am I sitting? Which matchups don't you like?
Yeah, I don't like Torrey Smith of the Baltimore Ravens playing against the Denver Broncos. I have him ranked outside the top 35 for the first time this year. The Ravens, they fired their offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron, this week. I'm not sure how that will all play out on Sunday, but they're playing against the Denver Broncos, who have been lights out against wide receivers. Only 2 touchdowns in their last 3 games. And Baltimore Ravens quarterback Joe Flacco has just 5 passing TDs in a 4-game span. So clearly not getting the kind of production that you'll want for the fantasy football semis. And then how about Kenny Britt of the Tennessee Titans? I have him ranked 33rd this week. Coming off a monster game against the Colts, 143 yards, his highest yardage total of the season. But you know what? Outside of that game, he hasn't gotten over 75 yards all season long, playing against a New York Jets defense that is giving up the 3rd least amount of points to wide receivers. I would leave Kenny Britt and Torrey Smith on the bench this week.
Billy, as far as your tight ends, you started this whole segment by saying you got to start your studs at this point. Now,
Yeah.
I would say that Jimmy Graham and Vernon Davis are both studs. Are you being hypocritical at this point by saying one of them?
I'm not. Jimmy Graham, in my mind, absolutely still a stud. I took Vernon Davis off my stud list about 5 weeks ago. Jimmy Graham, get him in your lineups this week, folks. You know, Butch, I'm getting a lot of questions at ffchamps.com. We have an expert advice service. They get one-on-one access, and a lot of people are emailing in asking if they should start Jimmy Graham this week. And I realize he hasn't had any TDs in his last 3 games and seems to be stuck in that 50 to 60-yard range. He didn't play against the Bucs the last time these two teams met, but the Buccaneers have been giving up double-digit fantasy points to tight ends in each of their last 3 games. You will be kicking yourself if you bench Jimmy Graham this week. He has to be in your lineups. Now, Vernon Davis, on the other hand, leave him on your bench. He can't be trusted. Less than 3 fantasy football points combined over the last 3 games. Less than 3, Butch. He's put up 2 goose eggs 2 of the last 3 weeks. And the Patriots, you know, they slowed down Owen Daniels, who was supposed to be a big part of that Texans offense back in Monday night on Week 14. I think they can do the same to Vernon Davis on that Sunday night matchup.
So again, Billy, final point, you're in your fantasy football playoffs. You're either 1 game away from the championship or you're starting them in some leagues. What's the one piece of advice to keep in your mind when you're deciding who to start or sit here?
Don't get cute. Roll with the guys that got you here.
I like it. Dance with the girl who brung you. Billy
That's
Enright.
right.
Check out ffchamps.com. It's time for you to be a champ. Forget about the chump part. It's championship time. It's money time. It's fantasy football playoff time. And ffchamps.com has you covered. Check out everything that they have.